Good morning and welcome to the Killik & Co market update. We had a really strong end to last week for UK markets and for sterling following the result of the general election. However, this week, things have somewhat gone back the other way. The reason being that Johnson wants to put in place legislation to ban an extension to the Brexit transition period. As things stand at the moment, we're due to leave the EU on the 31st of January 2020, but will remain in the customs union and the single market until the end of December 2020. Within the current agreement, there is scope for that transition period to be extended by 2 years, if either side feels it would be necessary to do that. However, Johnson has announced that he wants to ban the possibility of that 2-year extension. The Queen's speech this week also made it quite clear that delivering Brexit quickly is very much a priority. However, markets have reacted somewhat negatively to this. Firstly, because having just an 11-month transition period really does make people wonder whether it would be possible to achieve a comprehensive trade deal within that period of time. And also, if it's not possible for us to do that, does that put no deal back on the table? So I think those two questions have been weighing on the minds of investors this week. And for that reason, we have seen some weakness in sterling. If you have a look at this chart here showing sterling against the dollar over the last 2 years, you can see quite a clear drop-off over the last week. Also, if we look at the FTSE 250, which is the index which clearly shows the fortunes of domestic UK companies, you can see there has been a clear spike following the result of the general election, but over the last couple of days, there has been a decline in that index. That having been said, it is still very much above its pre-election levels, and if Brexit does proceed according to plan, investors very much hope that that's where the index will stay. And over in the US, it has been a very strong week for markets, with US markets hitting record highs. The S&P 500 has closed above 3,200 for the first time in history. And this is all despite the news that Donald Trump has been impeached. The House of Representatives this week voted to impeach the president. However, it is expected that he will be cleared by the Senate. This has all had very little bearing on what's happened in markets this week, and perhaps investors are thinking back to when President Bill Clinton was impeached, and he then went on to win a second term in office. So perhaps that's one reason why markets don't really seem to have reacted that strongly to the news of Donald Trump's impeachment. All in all, it really has been a very strong year for US stock markets. And finally, here in the UK, Andrew Bailey has been announced as the successor to Bank of England Governor Mark Carney. I think this will come as a small surprise to some. Andrew Bailey was very much seen as the favoured candidate back in June. However, as the chief executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, he has come under fire in recent months for the regulator's poor handling of the lack of liquidity and the eventual suspension of Neil Woodford's Equity Income Fund. However, it has been announced this morning that Andrew Bailey has been awarded this top job. He is seen as quite a slow and steady candidate. He's been at the Bank of England since 1985, and it is now expected that he will serve an 8-year term. So hopefully markets will react well to this long-term stability and just having someone well-known in place for such a long period of time. Also at the Bank of England this week, it's been announced that interest rates will be left on hold at 0.75%. But it's quite interesting to note that of the 9 people who voted, 7 voted to keep rates on hold and 2 voted to reduce interest rates here in the UK. So I think that does demonstrate that there is some appetite for reducing rates, and there is perhaps some concern that growth here in the UK is not quite as strong as it could be. Clearly, a lot of that depends on Brexit, and we'll just have to see how this pans out as we move into 2020. This is our last podcast for 2019, and we'll be back on the 10th of January 2020. So have a great Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you then.